The Terror and the Light, a story stretched on Thomas Cromwell's rack.
In the Passion Week of 1530, disgraced for failing to get Henry VIII a divorce and banished from London, Cardinal Wolsey and 160 of his retainers head northwards on the Old North Road. Come the third day of his journey, he overnights in the small priory dedicated to the martyr Thomas à Becket and St John the Baptist at Royston in Hertfordshire, leading one enterprising local to rebrand his inn as the Cardinal's Hat. Wolsey is to die that November, but the establishment will outlive him by a full 8 decades. Within 3 years, the country is gripped by paranoia following the king's marriage to Anne Boleyn and the break from Rome. One man, named Robert Dalyvell, is imprisoned, suspected of spying. When he is released, he is missing his ears. England is not a safe place to live. Soon Anne has lost not her ears, but her head, and Dalyvell will come under suspicion again. The Reformation is in its infancy and might yet be snuffed out. Following a bad harvest, protests erupt in the north of England, primarily in York, Cardinal Wolsey's former stronghold, and Lincolnshire. The protesters believe the king is being misled by his council, and that their pilgrimage of grace will save the country. The pilgrims are demanding the re-establishment of the Catholic Church, the restoration of the monasteries, and the removal of commoners such as Thomas Cromwell from the king's council. Pontefract Castle is besieged, and Henry dispatches an army to deal with the pilgrims. Following the suppression of the rebellion, another breaks out in January 1537, but is also crushed. More than 200 protesters are put to death. England remains vulnerable to both internal Catholic coup and foreign invasion while Henry lacks an heir. Jane Seymour is pregnant, but the king has declared both his daughters illegitimate, meaning the succession is not yet guaranteed. To make matters worse, his nephew in Scotland, James V, has revived the military pact known as the Old Alliance, and wed the daughter of Francis I of France. A move so worrying to Henry that when James refuses to break with Rome just 5 years later, Henry launches an incursion and initiates Scotland's rough wooing, also known as the 8 Years' War. Henry has good grounds to be worried. The European Catholic powers are conspiring to depose England's heretic king and replace him with James. To counter this, Henry's council orders that the defences of Calais, Carlisle and Berwick be bolstered, and sends letters to all local justices of the peace, telling them to be especially vigilant for anyone spreading sedition. In Royston, Robert Dalyvell, minus his ears, opens his mouth once too often, and on the 12th of June 1537 finds himself strapped onto the rack in a dungeon at the Tower of London. First sight of the terrifying contraption often inspires prisoners to say whatever the Lieutenant of the Tower wants, but not Dalyvell. He has influential relations in the north. His uncle is none other than Sir John de Laval, the High Sheriff of Northumberland. Quite how Robert has been taken in Royston, just a day's ride from London on the Old North Road, is unclear. Perhaps he was just passing through, though his initial confession, taken in the town on the 11th of June, clearly states that he is of Royston. It's possible this is a slip of the scribe's pen. Under torture in the Tower, Robert reveals that he visited Edinburgh the previous summer, where he stayed 8 weeks to learn cunning in the craft of a saddler. During the trip, divers Scotsmen had told him their king, James, should be crowned King of England in London before Midsummer Day 3 years or a month after. Reading to him out of a book of divination, they claimed the event had all been prophesied by Merlin himself. Dalyvell had also visited his northern relations and found work for 3 weeks at Chester Street. There, Some Scots had told him that James V was most worthy to be King of England, being next of blood. York, the city which that autumn would become a hotbed of the Pilgrimage of Grace, was another of the main stops on the Old North Road. For 2 whole weeks Dalyvell chose to ply his trade within its walls, though whether that trade was saddlery remains open to question. How long Dalyvell had been in Royston is not known, but on the first Monday in June he had a quiet chat with a gentleman's servant in the stables of the Greyhound Inn. Just 7 weeks earlier the town's priory had been dissolved, leaving its 6 canons with little to support themselves, though the prior had been allowed an annual pension. The priory and its all-important market had dominated day-to-day life for more than 350 years, and the townsfolk must have worried what their future might now be. Undoubtedly, discontented mutterings about the dissolution encouraged Dalyvell to let slip the Scots prophecy. In those fractious times it was not a wise move, and on 11th of June he found himself in front of a panel comprising of 4 leading gentlemen of the town, John Martin, Edward Annesley, Richard Chamber and William Chamber, and 3 from York, Peter Robinson, Richard Goldthorpe and Tristram Tresh. In their record of his examination they noted Dalyvell's prediction that if the king did not amend his ways he would be dead within a month of the feast of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist, the 25th of June, the following year. In addition, all but one of Henry's lords would perish. In Dalyvell's words, a single horse worth 10 shillings shall be able to bear all the noble blood of England. An angel had apparently told him to show your prince that the Scots would never be true to him. It was all very perplexing. Dalyvell's claims were far too damning for the local gentry to investigate further, so that same day they transported him to the capital. In London, Dalyvell was handed over to the Lieutenant of the Tower of London, Edmund Walsingham, for interrogation. Henry's chief counsellor, Thomas Cromwell, had already prepared a memorandum instructing Walsingham on the questions he was to put to the prisoner.
1. To ask him when he was last in Scotland and why he went thither. 2. How long and with whom he dwelled there. 3. What he heard of the king and realm, and from whom. 4. With whom he spake and where he stayed in the north on his journey. 5. Whether he has heard of any prophecies. 6. If any religious person had read him any prophecies. 7. To how many people he has told the matters contained in the 2 articles. 8. What he said to the Scotchman who told him of the effect of the matter contained in the 2 articles. 9. How long ago and how often the angel appeared to him.
If Dalyvell was a spy or agent provocateur, he was better at his job than Walsingham. Of course, he may just have been deluded. Dalyvell had no memory for the names of the people who had revealed the prophecy, but could affirm that they had not been priests, and that the angel had appeared to him on 2 occasions around Palm Sunday. Other than that, all he really revealed was the extent of his travels. In his report dated the 12th of July, Walsingham noted, "I brought him to the rack and there strained him, using such circumstances as my poor wit would extend to. But more cannot I get of him than this. Yesternight I proved him at his first coming, and about 8 of the clock again, and in the morning after again, by fair means and threatenings." Dalyvell's suffering did little more than shine a light on the all-pervasive paranoia holding England in its thrall. That October, complications in childbirth felled Jane Seymour just 12 days after delivering Henry a male heir. Cromwell's next choice of a bride for the king, Anne of Cleves, proved a disaster, for which Cromwell paid with his head. Concerned at destabilising rumours still swirling throughout the country, in 1542 Henry persuaded Parliament to pass an Act concerning false prophecies upon declaration of names, arms or badges, which made the writing, printing, singing or retelling of any false prophecy concerning the king or his nobles punishable by forfeiture and death. This act, of course, gave no hint as to how to determine whether a prophecy was false, and Henry VIII made sure that judgment would remain his alone. Such was the privilege and curse of kingship.
The Terror and the Light was researched, written and narrated by Graham Palmer. Visit grahampalmer.co.uk. Sources quoted include A History of Royston by Alfred Kingston, The Life and Death of Cardinal Wolsey by George Cavendish, The Book of Prisoners, Letters and Papers, Foreign and Domestic, Henry VIII, Volume 12, Part 2, June to December 1537, and an Act concerning false prophecies upon declarations of names, arms or badges. The voice artists were Louis Holder and Karen Palmer, and it was post-produced by Louis Holder. The music is the Earl of Salisbury, copyright Milady Clare's music and used by kind permission. You can find out more about the musicians at miladyclares.com.